Hey guys, gonna do a quick little video for you guys. If you were not able to make the meeting that we had where we were kind of talking about our new life group format, kind of the storytelling thing we were gonna do, this video will kind of help cover that. And I apologize kind of for the quality in a little bit, but hopefully you'll be able to see it, and other than the glare that's currently on my forehead, you'll be able to pick up a few things from it. In the meeting, we talked about how really we have three basic things that we want to see in student ministry. We want to see begin, grow, and serve. And actually the series we're about to start is going to cover all of those, and just dealing with the beginning, kind of our Wednesday night service. We want students to be a part of that, be engaged in that, invite their friends to that to be an environment where they can always invite people, and it's a great place for them to come and hang out and actually begin a relationship with Christ. The second thing being grow, our life group times. That's kind of what we're going to cover here. And then the final one, serve, getting students plugged into ministry and connected in where they feel an ownership in it, they're a part of it, and hopefully we see them after they graduate and they're not just gone because they've actually been a part of it, seeing what that looks like. But this is really going to deal with our discipleship time and grow. The life group time is such an important time, and again, I just want to reiterate some of the things from the meeting. Just being relational. So much of the storytelling stuff that we're going to be doing, excuse me, it's not so much even teaching as much as it is facilitating. Facilitating good conversations with students where they're able to ask questions, be engaged, be a part of it, at the same time knowing who those students are, where they go to school, how they're wired, and just spending time with them, doing something once a semester. This is huge. We want to be very relational. We want to be a part of their lives. And so the storytelling thing kind of comes into that, because it's going to allow us a couple things. One, for students who are just transitioning from the begin stage. They've come to a couple of our services and now they're getting plugged into a life group. For some of these students, they're never going to have heard these stories before. And so they're going to be hearing Bible stories for the first time. They're going to be able to see them in Scripture, hear them told from a storytelling perspective and read to them when we get done with that. And then kind of engage in some questions where they are able to ask things, and really just have some good discussion with groups and how they feel like they relate to different people, and how they can live that out. And then it also catches the other end of it, where we've got students who they've maybe grown up in church, they've heard these stories 100 times, and know that's kind of where I'm at. But at the same time, if I'm not actually living out the things, the application from the story, and putting that into place, I haven't really learned anything. And so this is going to take them to a point where they are given the opportunity to share the story, the big things, actually taking that out to their friends, sharing the story and engaging them. Hey, how do you guys relate to this? How do you feel like you're a part of this story? And so, again, this is not a catch-all. This is not something where we've kind of stumbled onto the greatest discipleship method. But for where we are at, I think this is going to be a good starting point just to begin really pouring into our students, really discipling them, growing them, teaching them what it is to be a follower of Christ and to live out some of these principles that we're going to see that Jesus and that Scripture teaches to us. And so today I want to take you through an actual storytelling thing, and I'm going to try and keep this fairly short, and it'll work out pretty well. This is actually the first one that we're going to do is kind of our new beginning series as we start doing the storytelling thing. And so I just want to actually go through, kind of show you what it would look like if I were telling a story, if I had a group of students in front of me, what it would look like, and then kind of going through the questions, the three questions that we have that go with this. And so this story is actually going to be out of Matthew chapter 4, and it's basically Jesus calling his disciples. As we kind of start this, and we're going to be going through several stories that deal with a new beginning. This is where it began for a lot of disciples, and so this is kind of how the story would go if I were sitting with a group of students, and I had them in front of me and I was telling this. As Jesus begins his ministry, he's about 30 years old. He's beginning to actually go out and minister and tell people what the gospel is and who it is and about himself. And so in doing that, he is going to gather together a group of people that we call the disciples, those 12 guys that we've heard so many different stories about. And as that begins, Jesus is actually wandering about one day, probably not wandering. He was pretty intentional in where he went, but he ends up at a place called the Sea of Galilee. The Sea of Galilee is a place that it's a large body of water that plays into a lot of different Bible stories. You hear it all throughout the New Testament. It's a very central location to where Jesus is going to be doing his ministry. and at the same time it's an area of huge commerce. And so you'd have all of these fishermen, all of these sailors, all of these people that made their living from this body of water. And so Jesus is there. He's at the Sea of Galilee, and he's making his way around it, and he sees a group of people. And Jesus begins to engage those people, and it's two brothers that actually start this off, Simon Peter and his brother Andrew. And Jesus looks out and he sees these guys, and they're probably just doing their normal daily thing. For them, they probably got up early in the morning, went out, brought their nets in or put new nets out, tried to gather in fish. They're trying to work hard. I mean, this is something this took a lot of work. And so these guys are very engaged in what they're doing, and suddenly Jesus shows up. And Jesus doesn't really preface it with a lot of things. He doesn't really introduce himself or anything like that. He doesn't really start up a huge conversation with them. He just throws out this one little bitty phrase, "Come and follow me, and I will make you fishers of men." I mean, just something as simple as that. And you know that Jesus has to be an amazing guy. Because if someone walked up on the street today and said something like that to us, we think they were a little crazy. We might kind of begin to walk to the other side of the street from that person. But Jesus, because he is the Son of God, and because he is just the face that he must have had as he said this, these two guys who had no idea who he was, who had no idea the journey they were about to begin, these two fishermen, which is a really gritty job back then. Not a lot of fishermen can read. They're not writing books or anything like that. This man walks up, says, "Hey, you come with me. I'm going to make you fishers of men." They immediately drop what they're doing, and they go and they follow him. And they begin to walk with him. I mean, just from that initial little conversation. Not a lot of, "Hey, this is what you need to do in order to be a follower of me. Just come and follow me." And so these two guys, they jump on board with him, and they begin to walk with him. As he begins to walk down a little bit further, he sees two other brothers. And he reaches out to them, and they're with their father, and they're doing the same thing. They're fishing. They're bringing in all these fish. They're just trying to get their work done for the day. And Jesus, again, he just engages them and says, "Hey, come and follow me." And it says immediately these two brothers, they drop what they're doing, and they go and they follow Jesus. They leave their father. They leave their nets. They leave everything behind, and they go and they follow him. Okay, so that's kind of how this story would go. And again, this is a pretty brief one. The story time, as we kind of go through our life group times, I know we talked about how time is kind of short. The story does not have to be an hour long. You can get that out in just about 5 minutes, and I mean, I drug that one out. You could probably do that one in 3 or 4. But you get the idea behind the story. Here's a group of people that are following Jesus now. And so once we've actually told the story, I will go back and read it. I mean, that one is Matthew. It's chapter 5, verses 18 through 22. I mean, just a couple of verses. I'll actually go through and read that so they can hear it, not from just a storytelling time, but also from, hey, we're actually going to read the scripture. And then there's 3 basic questions. The first question, who do you relate to in this story? This is where we're trying to really pull a lot of the students in. I know a lot of times students will sit back, and you'll have a group that will always answer the questions, they'll always throw everything out, and then you've got another group that just sits back and they don't want to do anything, and they're just kind of there. There's no real wrong answer to that question. Who do you relate to in the story? Your answer is the correct one. For me, as I'm looking at some of these guys, I would probably relate with Andrew. Just kind of knowing him, knowing his personality, as he had to be a little bit intrigued, obviously. I feel like I would relate to him. Students are going to relate to different people. Some of them may feel like the Father. Some of them may feel like Jesus trying to engage people. I mean, this opens up so many different avenues of, hey, who do you relate to in this story? And so the first question is that, who do you relate to in this story? The second question, how do you see God working in this story? From this is where we get a lot of our application. Each week we definitely want to give them some type of application that they can take into their lives, they can put into practice. I mean, from this one you see obedience as these guys begin to follow Jesus. You see sacrifice in the father who let his 2 sons, James and John, just kind of go off with this guy. You've got sacrifice, you've got obedience. You got obedience from Jesus, just as he's calling these people. 2 huge things, sacrifice and obedience, that you can take from this and begin to talk to students and go, hey, what does it look like to be obedient in our lives? What is Jesus calling us to do? He called these people to be his disciples. What is he calling us to do as his children? Okay, from a sacrifice standpoint, what does it mean that we're going to have to give up in our own lives in order to truly follow Jesus in a way that we're going to be able to engage other people, and we're going to be able to enjoy this relationship more than anything else? And so from this, the second question, how do you see God working in this story? a lot of application comes from it. The third question goes back to actually putting this into practice. Everybody has expectation in the world. If they go to school, if they're in a sport, anything like that, it seems like church is the one that has the least expectation. No, we want to have expectations for our students. And so we put that ball back in their court. How can you share this story this week? Whether it be sitting around a lunch table, whether it be engaging one of your friends, how can you take this story that you've heard someone share with you, that you've been able to see read and maybe read yourself, how can you now take that story, put yourself in a situation where you can share it as well? Those are the three big questions. Who do you relate to in the story? How do you see God working in it? And how can you share this story with someone else? And so we kind of catch a lot of different things. And you know what? The following week, I hope we get to hear amazing testimonies of students that have gone out and sat around at their lunch tables, or sat in a practice, or sat with their families in some different way and shared these stories and engaged someone and heard some cool things back too. I think when students actually begin to do that, they'll begin to teach themselves some of it. Because they will have such an excitement that I actually got to share this story and someone actually was responding to it. And so this is kind of our discipleship method. We're going to be doing this for probably a good long while, and so we'll be engaging them on Wednesday nights with this. I just wanted to be able to give you guys some type of visual to where you can kind of see it, and hopefully we can put this into practice. And in a few weeks, guys, I really hope that we see some amazing things happening, and I really just appreciate everything you guys do. We could not do student ministry without you guys pouring into these students' lives, and so again, I'm going to say thank you, and man, I just look forward to seeing what God does with this. Hope you guys have a great day.